Dear children, today we will start with the first chapter of the ninth class textbook Beehive. The first chapter is The Fun They Had, written by Isaac Asimov. The Fun They Had is a short story and can be termed as a science fiction. Its background setting is in the year 2157, that is 2157. This story takes us into a world where technology will play a dominant role in the education system, and that in place of the paper, books, and pen, the education system will be totally dependent on the technology and machines. Now we'll talk about the theme in the story. There can be many themes in the story, like number 1, effects of extreme mechanization. Number 2, comparison between the schools of present day with those expected to exist in the 22nd century. Number 3, life experience is fun. It is shown through the story what will be the effects of extreme mechanization on the future schools. The second theme shows the contrast between the present day schools where the children go to school and the schools that are expected to exist in the 22nd century where all the students have their individual schools in their own houses that consists of machines like computer screen, e-books, and a robotic teacher. Third theme is life experience is fun. It is shown through the story that future schools will definitely impart knowledge to the students, but at the same time these students will miss out on the fun that they can have while going to the same school, studying together, sitting together, and talking to each other. Background setting, as we have already talked about the background setting, the story sets in the year 2157. Let's talk about the characters of the story. There are two main characters in the story. One is Margie and the other is Tommy. Margie is an 11-year-old girl who represents the future students. Through this character, it is shown in the story how boring can be the future studies. Enclosed in a building, enclosed in a house, in a room that consists of only the robotic teacher and the screens. Second character is Tommy. Tommy is a boy of 13 years and he plays an important role in the story because he is the only one who finds the book from the attic of his house, and this book belongs to his grandfather. For the better understanding of the story, let's discuss the summary first with the help of the points. The first point says, finding a real book. That means in the first phase of the story, it is shown that Tommy found a real book from the attic of his house, and later on this book is shown to Margie and they both are very much surprised to see that the text, the words on the book don't move. They are stable because they compare these words with the words on their screen. In the second part of the story, Margie's hatred for school is shown. Margie is a character who represents the future student who doesn't at all like to study in a room, all alone. In the story, Tommy is shown to be a very curious boy. As soon as he discovers a real book, he starts reading it. Although he does not like the idea of printed books, but he shares this with Margie also. Margie's opinion about the old school. Margie is very surprised at the idea that the old schools had the real men as teachers and classes were conducted in a special building called school. She is very excited to learn that in those times the students of the same level studied together. They used to go to the same class. They could sit together and could solve their problems together. Now we will start with the text and the explanation of the lesson. Margie even wrote about it in that night in her diary. On the page headed 17 May 2157, she wrote, "Today Tommy found a real book." This paragraph tells us that Margie, who is only 11 years old girl, writes a diary entry on the night of 17th May 2157. Children, I want to tell you that we are living in 2020. As told earlier, the story is set in the future in the year 2157, so almost 1.5 century from now. In the diary entry, she writes how surprised she was when Tommy found a real book, and she is feeling so strange because in her times the real books did not exist. They only had ebooks and printing on paper was totally extinct. That's why Margie was very astonished to see the real book given by Tommy. Next paragraph. It was a very old book. Margie's grandfather once said that when he was a little boy, his grandfather told him that there was a time when all stories were printed on paper. When Margie sees the real book shown by Tommy, she is very much surprised. She is reminded of her grandfather because once upon a time, her grandfather told her that her grandfather's grandfather studied with such kind of books, which were of paper and printed words. So, this kind of book is historical for her. Something which they cannot believe and they even cannot imagine. Next paragraph. They turned the pages, which were yellow and crinkly, and it was awfully funny to read words that stood still instead of moving the way they were supposed to on a screen, you know. To see a real kind of book was a very strange experience for Tommy and Margie. When they turned the pages, they found that these pages were yellow and crinkly because the book was very, very old. It was awfully funny to read words, and this was very strange for them to read the words that remained stable on a place. Because when they compared the words on the words which appeared on their screen, they were surprised because the words on the screen kept moving, and these words were at the same place every time. There are two difficult words in these paragraphs. Crinkly means with many folds or lines, something that is crushed. Number 2, awfully, terribly. Next, and then when they turned back to the page before, it had the same words on it that it had when they read it the first time. So both of them were very much surprised to see that the books had the words at the same place always, which was totally contrary to the screen on which the words kept moving in their rooms. That was called the school for these children. Next paragraph. Guy said, "Tommy, what a waste. When you are through with the book, you just throw it away. I guess our television screen must have had 1,000,000 books on it, and it's good for plenty more. I wouldn't throw it away." In this paragraph, Tommy shows a disliking about the printed books. He says this was just a waste because when one finishes a story, he cannot read the other story in the same book. On the contrary, he felt that the computer screen that they had in their school room, it has the screen that shows the different story, different book every time. He says that the printed book has to be thrown away after reading once. But this is not with the screen because screen has a lot of books in it, and when one finishes one story, one book, he can always have the other one. Next paragraph. Same with mine, said Margie. She was 11 and hadn't seen as many telebooks as Tommy had. He was 13. Through this paragraph, Margie showed that she agreed with Tommy's opinion because she was only 11 years old and she has not read many books, as Tommy had already read many books. Because Tommy was older to Margie, Margie was only 11 and Tommy was 13 years old. Next. She said, "Where did you find it?" "In my house," he pointed without looking because he was busy reading in the attic. "What's it about?" "School." Margie was scornful. "School? What's there to write about school? I hate school." Margie always hated school but now she hated it more than ever. The mechanical teacher had been giving her test after test in geography, and she had been doing worse and worse until her mother had shaken her head sorrowfully and sent for the county inspector. Margie asked Tommy where he had found the printed book, to which Tommy replied that he had found the printed book in the attic of his house. And this time, while answering, he was so busy reading the book that he did not remove his glance from the book and kept reading it. Margie asked what the book was about, to which Tommy replied that the book was about the school life. Suddenly, Margie becomes angry and shows her disliking about the school, because these days she did not like the school because she was not doing good in geography, and her maths teacher, who was a mechanical teacher, was giving test after test and she was not doing good at all. Finally, her mother thought that there was something wrong with the machine, so she called the county inspector to check the machine. Finally, her mother thought that there was something wrong with the machine, so she called the county inspector to check the machine.